I heard the chain rattle before I saw the gate slam shut. Steel crashed against steel, echoing across the quiet lake, while the sharp smell of fresh-cut pine mixed with diesel exhaust from an idling pickup. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I stepped out of my truck, keys still dangling in my hand. 40 feet ahead, a brand-new wrought iron gate blocked the only road leading to my cabin. A woman in an immaculate white golf shirt folded her arms and smiled like she'd rehearsed this moment for weeks. "Private HOA access," she called. "Turn around before you're trespassing." I glanced past her. Morning mist drifted across the lake behind the trees, and the weathered cedar roof of my cabin peeked through the branches exactly where it was supposed to be. Home was less than 300 yards away. "So you're telling me I can't drive to my own property?" I asked. "You can," she replied sweetly. "After you join the association, pay the fees, and agree to our community rules." The lock hanging from the chain caught the sunlight. It was brand new. The concrete footings around the gate were still damp enough to smell like wet cement. Somebody had worked fast. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I rested one hand on the faded wooden survey marker standing quietly beside the road. Most people would have mistaken it for an old fence post. I didn't. Behind it stood an enormous white oak, its trunk wrapped with rusted strands of forgotten barbed wire. Just beyond the tree sat a cracked stone monument almost hidden beneath wild grass, carved with numbers so worn they were barely visible anymore. 3 forgotten landmarks. 3 details nobody else seemed to notice. The woman certainly didn't. "My name's Ethan Walker," I said. "I bought the lake cabin last month." She gave a dismissive laugh. "I'm Maggie Holloway, president of Pine Ridge Shores HOA. Congratulations on your purchase. Unfortunately, this road belongs to our community." What she didn't know was that something about those old markers had bothered me from the moment I first toured the property. I hadn't figured out why yet, but years of working around land surveys had taught me that forgotten boundaries usually stayed forgotten because someone wanted them that way. A security guard rolled up beside her in a golf cart, its electric motor humming softly. "Need me to call the sheriff?" he asked. Maggie never took her eyes off me. "If he refuses to leave." I looked down at the folded closing documents resting on my passenger seat. Underneath them sat an old county map the seller had handed me almost as an afterthought, saying, "You might find this interesting someday." At the time, I barely looked at it. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. The breeze carried the smell of lake water and damp earth across the road. Somewhere behind the gate, a loon called over the glassy surface. Everything about the morning felt peaceful except the people standing between me and my own front porch. I smiled, climbed back into my truck, and drove away without another word. Maggie waved as if she'd already won. She had no idea she was standing on the biggest mistake her HOA had ever made. What would you do if someone locked you out of your own property? And where are you watching from? I didn't buy the cabin because it was fancy. I bought it because nobody else seemed to want it. 3 weeks earlier, the place had smelled like cedar, old fishing tackle, and rain-soaked timber. The dock leaned slightly toward the water. The windows needed paint. Half the porch railing wobbled if you leaned on it too hard. It was perfect. The seller, an 80-year-old widower named Harold Benson, slid a stack of papers across the kitchen table while sunlight spilled through dusty windows. "Everyone wants the houses inside Pine Ridge Shores," he said. "Nobody wants this one. Because it's outside the HOA?" He nodded. "They've been trying to convince every owner along this road to join for years." I smiled and signed anyway. Peace and privacy were worth more than matching mailboxes. Closing day came with the smell of fresh coffee and printer ink inside the county title office. Every document checked out. My survey matched the deed. The title company never mentioned disputes. The county clerk stamped the transfer with a loud metallic thump, and by noon I officially owned the cabin, the dock, and every acre listed on the paperwork. Or so I believed. The first sign that something wasn't right came 4 days later. I drove out carrying lumber and a toolbox, planning to replace the porch steps before sunset. Long before I reached the cabin, I heard heavy equipment growling somewhere beyond the trees. The scent of hot asphalt drifted through my open window. Construction. That didn't make sense. When I rounded the curve, I found a paving crew widening sections of the gravel road. Orange cones stretched for hundreds of feet. A compact roller crawled back and forth while workers poured fresh blacktop around brand-new concrete curbs. "Who's paying for this?" I asked the foreman. He checked his clipboard. Pine Ridge Shores HOA. This road belongs to them. He shrugged. That's what the contract says. Contract, not deed. There was a difference. I kept driving until I reached the neighborhood entrance. Landscapers planted decorative shrubs while electricians installed stone lanterns beside a massive wooden sign reading, "Welcome to Pine Ridge Shores." Grand reopening. July 4th. Only 3 weeks away. Residents wandered around taking pictures as if the entire entrance had always looked that way. Then I saw Maggie. White visor, crisp polo shirt, gold sunglasses, clipboard tucked beneath one arm like a badge of authority. She walked directly toward me. "You must be the new cabin owner. Ethan, we're improving property values for everyone using this road." I don't remember agreeing to any improvements. She smiled without warmth. "You benefit from them, so you'll contribute." She handed me an envelope. Inside was an invoice. Road Improvement Assessment. Gate Construction Assessment. Annual HOA membership. Payment due within 14 days. Failure to comply may result in restricted access. I looked for my signature. There wasn't one. What if I don't join? Her smile widened. "You'll discover very quickly that life out here depends on this road." As she walked away, a gust of wind flipped the invoice over. Printed at the bottom, almost hidden beneath the payment instructions, was a parcel number. I stared at it. Something about those numbers felt strangely familiar. Then I remembered seeing nearly the same parcel listed inside Harold's closing documents. At that moment, I knew this wasn't just an aggressive HOA trying to collect fees. Someone had attached the wrong piece of land to the wrong claim, and I was going to find out exactly how they had done it. I drove straight to the cabin instead of going home. The afternoon air smelled like warm pine needles and lake water, and somewhere across the shoreline a chainsaw growled before falling silent. I unlocked the weathered storage shed beside the dock and pulled out the same aluminum survey rod I'd carried for years. Old habits don't disappear just because you sell a construction company. People think survey markers are obvious. They aren't. Most disappear beneath weeds, tree roots, and decades of neglect. But when you've spent enough mornings watching excavation crews argue over 6 inches of property line, your eyes begin catching details everyone else walks past. The faded wooden stake beside the road wasn't random. Neither was the white oak wrapped in rusted barbed wire. I stretched a measuring tape between them, checking distances against the copy of my survey folded inside a waterproof tube. The crisp paper still smelled faintly of blueprint ink. Every number landed exactly where it should. The road didn't. It drifted several feet farther west than the drawing suggested. Not much, just enough to make me stop breathing for a second. My father used to tell me, a crooked fence doesn't start lawsuits. A crooked survey does. He wasn't a lawyer. He built bridges for nearly 40 years, and he respected measurements the way some people respected scripture. When I was 12, he'd hand me a steel tape and make me measure every footing twice before concrete trucks arrived. "Concrete forgives nobody," he'd always say. Neither did land. Back inside the cabin, dust floated through golden sunlight pouring across the old dining table. I opened the cedar chest Harold had insisted came with the property. "You'll appreciate what's inside one day," he'd told me during closing. Most buyers probably would have thrown it away. Inside lay yellowed fishing licenses, faded family photographs, a brass cabin key older than I was, and a flat metal document box with a broken leather handle. The latch squeaked open. Old paper carries a smell unlike anything else, dry, earthy, almost sweet. Inside rested folded plats, handwritten notes, and a black and white aerial photograph showing the lake decades before Pine Ridge Shores even existed. I didn't unfold everything. One corner caught my attention first. A narrow pencil line traced what looked suspiciously like today's access road. Before I could study it further, tires crunched outside. I killed the lights and stepped quietly toward the window. A white SUV rolled slowly along the shoulder. Maggie's. She wasn't sightseeing. She climbed out carrying a clipboard, walked directly to the weathered survey stake near the road, and crouched beside it. Her gloved hand brushed dirt away from the base. She looked over both shoulders. Then she photographed it. Not the cabin. Not the dock. The marker. She climbed back into the SUV and drove away without noticing me standing behind the curtains. That told me everything I needed to know. She already knew those old boundary markers mattered. She just didn't know exactly why. I unfolded the aerial photograph another few inches. Beneath it rested something even older, a county engineering map stamped with a faded metal seal and tied shut by a brittle cotton ribbon. I never opened it. Not yet. Because one thing had become painfully clear. This wasn't an HOA inventing fees to bully one homeowner. Someone had spent years quietly building an entire neighborhood around a boundary they desperately hoped nobody would ever verify. By Monday morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Email. Text message. Certified delivery notification. Another email. The smell of fresh coffee barely reached me before the first envelope hit the kitchen table. Pine Ridge Shores HOA had officially labeled my cabin a non-compliant property, creating community safety concerns. The violations bordered on absurd. Unauthorized exterior repairs, improper waste storage, unapproved dock maintenance, failure to maintain shared roadway. That last one made me read the page twice. Shared roadway. Interesting choice of words. Not HOA-owned roadway. Shared. Someone had been careful. By lunchtime, the neighborhood Facebook page exploded with photos of my cabin taken from the road. Someone described me as the outsider refusing to contribute while everyone else pays. Comments piled up faster than rainwater in a ditch. He wants a free ride. Probably another investor. Maybe he'll sell. Nobody asked me a single question. That afternoon, I drove to the local bank to finalize a renovation credit line I'd arranged before closing. The loan officer frowned as she studied her screen. "I'm sorry, Mr. Walker." "What changed?" "A notice of pending access dispute was filed against the property this morning." "I wasn't notified." "It doesn't prevent ownership." She hesitated. "But it complicates financing." Exactly what someone wanted. When I stepped outside, Maggie was already waiting beside her white SUV. She held a leather folder instead of her usual clipboard. "You've had a busy morning." "So have you." She smiled. "This doesn't need to become expensive." She opened the folder. Inside sat a purchase agreement. They wanted the cabin. Cash. 30-day closing. The price looked generous until I remembered lakefront land nearby had doubled in value over the past 5 years. She wasn't offering market value. She was offering panic value. "You'd save yourself a great deal of stress," she said softly. "Life becomes difficult when access issues reach the county." I closed the folder. "I'm not selling." Her expression never changed. "You will." Then she drove away. That night, I installed 2 additional trail cameras overlooking the road and another facing the old survey marker beside the white oak. Tiny infrared indicators disappeared once darkness settled over the trees. Around 1:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the live feed. Headlights stayed off. A pickup rolled slowly into view using only parking lights. 3 figures climbed out carrying flashlights wrapped with red filters. No conversation. Just boots scraping gravel. One man walked directly toward the weathered survey marker. Another produced bolt cutters. Not for the gate. For the rusted barbed wire wrapped around the old oak. The third carried a shovel. I watched dirt fly through the night while crickets fell strangely silent. One camera caught only their backs. Another captured a side profile. Then Maggie stepped into frame. She pointed toward the base of the tree. "Keep digging," she whispered. Her microphone couldn't catch everything, but it caught those 2 words perfectly. Minutes later, the shovel struck metal. Clang. Every man froze. Maggie dropped to one knee and brushed soil away with both hands, as if she'd been searching for that exact spot all along. She already knew something had been buried beneath that tree. The camera recorded her reaching into the hole. Then the screen went black. Someone had found my camera before I found out what they were trying so desperately to hide. The county hearing lasted less than 12 minutes, and I lost almost every argument. The room smelled of old carpet, copier toner, and burnt coffee. Ceiling lights buzzed overhead, while folding chairs scraped against the tile floor. Maggie sat 3 rows ahead of me, wearing another crisp white polo, her hands neatly folded over a leather binder thick enough to intimidate anyone who hadn't read every page inside it. The county administrator flipped through her documents. "Mrs. Holloway has submitted maintenance agreements, roadway improvement contracts, and community access records dating back several years." He turned toward me. "Mr. Walker, at this stage, I don't see sufficient evidence to suspend ongoing road operations." That was it. Temporary ruling. The construction continued. The gate stayed. My access remained restricted whenever the HOA decided it should be. Maggie never looked directly at me as everyone filed out. She didn't have to. Her smile said everything. Outside, the humid afternoon wrapped around me like wet canvas. Asphalt shimmered in the July heat, carrying the sharp smell of tar from the crews still widening the entrance road. Neighbors passing the courthouse gave me polite nods that somehow felt colder than open hostility. The rumor had become official. I was the man trying to stop community improvements. My phone rang before I reached my truck. "Don't drive home yet," a calm voice said. It was Daniel Pierce, the surveyor I'd hired 2 days earlier. "I think the county overlooked something." 20 minutes later, we spread every document across the scarred workbench inside my cabin. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight, while an old box fan hummed in the corner, pushing the smell of cedar and aging paper through the room. Daniel studied the black-and-white aerial photograph from Harold's document box. "Why is this folded? I never opened it completely." "Open it." The brittle paper crackled beneath my fingers. Hidden beneath the fold was the same faded engineering seal I'd noticed before. Daniel froze. "Where's the county engineering map?" I handed him the tube tied with the brittle cotton ribbon. He untied it carefully. Inside wasn't just a survey. It was an original county infrastructure plat prepared decades before Pine Ridge shores existed. Every easement, every drainage line, every boundary monument, everything. His pencil stopped over one notation printed beside the access road. "See this?" The lettering was tiny. "Private service access. Subject to cabin parcel 18. Not dedicated for public ownership." Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The road everyone believed belonged to the HOA had never been transferred into public ownership. Not once. Daniel reached for another page tucked beneath the plat. It was the county engineering approval signed nearly 40 years earlier. Attached to it by a rusted paper clip hung a brass key tag stamped with the exact number carved into the weathered stone marker near the white oak. The key from Harold's cedar chest fit perfectly through its ring. "This isn't a coincidence," Daniel whispered. The old aerial photograph suddenly made sense. The survey marker, the white oak, the buried metal object Maggie had been digging for. They all pointed toward the same forgotten structure. We followed the map downhill through waist-high grass until we found a concrete utility building almost completely hidden beneath vines and moss. The heavy steel door sat locked, its hinges orange with rust. When I slipped Harold's brass key into the cylinder, it turned with a deep metallic click. Inside, cool air carried the smell of damp concrete, machine oil, and old records. Dust-covered control panels lined one wall. Metal filing cabinets filled another. A narrow shelf held leather-bound maintenance logs stretching back decades. Daniel opened the first ledger. Every entry identified the access road as privately maintained under the cabin property's ownership. Not the county. Not the HOA. My property. I reached for my phone. "We're taking this straight back to the county." Daniel caught my arm before I dialed. "No." I stared at him. "They think they've already beaten you," he said quietly. "If we move today, they'll hide the rest. Let them keep believing they're winning just a little longer." I wanted to march straight back into the county office with the maintenance logs tucked under my arm. Daniel shut the steel door behind us before I could take 3 steps. The heavy latch echoed through the forgotten utility building, mixing with the steady drip of water somewhere deep beneath the concrete floor. "No," he said. "We've got everything." He shook his head. "We've got enough to start winning. Not enough to finish." The smell of machine oil and damp paper still clung to my clothes as he explained it in the simplest terms. If someone lies once, a lawyer argues about intent. If they repeat the same lie to 5 different agencies, each signature becomes another piece of evidence. So we let them keep talking. We let them build the entire case against themselves. For the next 8 days, my cabin became less of a home and more of an investigation room. The old dining table disappeared beneath scanners, survey maps, memory cards, and yellow legal pads. The printer hummed late into every night, while rain tapped softly against the windows. Every camera clip received a timestamp. Every photograph matched a GPS coordinate. Every old maintenance log was scanned twice before being sealed inside evidence folders. We documented everything. Not assumptions. Facts. Daniel hired an independent surveying crew that quietly verified every monument without notifying the HOA. Their robotic total station clicked and rotated beneath the morning sun, while passing neighbors assumed they were inspecting drainage. They never questioned it. Meanwhile, Maggie grew louder. Certified letters arrived almost daily. One demanded immediate payment. Another threatened foreclosure proceedings. Then came the biggest mistake yet. She mailed a formal declaration to my bank, my insurance company, the county planning office, and even the local fire marshal stating that Pine Ridge Shores HOA owned, maintained, and exclusively controlled the only legal access road serving my cabin. Every letter carried her signature. Every letter contained the same false statement. Daniel smiled for the first time all week. She just multiplied the damages. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. The caller refused to leave a voicemail. Instead, an email appeared 15 minutes later. No greeting, no signature, just 3 words. Check your mailbox. Inside the weatherproof box at the end of my driveway waited a plain brown envelope smelling faintly of cigarette smoke and engine grease. Inside rested a flash drive. Nothing else. Back at the cabin, I plugged it into an offline laptop. Hundreds of archived HOA emails filled the screen. Board discussions, construction invoices, engineering drafts. Then one message stopped me cold. From Maggie Holloway. Subject: Access Road Documentation. If anyone asks, continue using the subdivision ownership packet. Do not circulate the original county plat. It raises unnecessary questions about Parcel 18. Attached beneath it sat another reply from the HOA's former property manager. I still believe recording the road as HOA property exposes us if the original maintenance files surface. Maggie's response came 4 minutes later. They won't. Daniel leaned back silently. So she knew. She always knew. The next morning, another surprise arrived. Frank Delaney, Pine Ridge Shores retired maintenance supervisor, knocked on my cabin door carrying a weathered toolbox. I quit 6 months ago, he said quietly. They told us never to touch the old control building. He reached into the toolbox and handed me a faded work notebook. I kept copies. Inside were inspection records dating back nearly 20 years, each identifying my cabin parcel as the owner responsible for structural maintenance beneath the access road. Every page matched the forgotten ledgers. Every signature tightened the trap. Meanwhile, the neighborhood prepared for its grand 4th of July reopening. Fresh flags lined both sides of the entrance. Electricians tested decorative lights. A brass ribbon-cutting stand appeared beside the new gate. Maggie gave interviews, smiling for cameras as if victory had already been engraved in stone. I watched workers polish the sign from the porch of my cabin through a pair of binoculars. Daniel folded another document into the evidence binder. Let them finish decorating, he said. They're building the perfect stage. For the first time since this began, I looked toward that gate without anger. Everything we needed was finally in place. I woke at 4:18 a.m. to the sharp vibration of my phone and the distant growl of diesel engines rolling through the trees. 3 motion alerts. 2 cameras offline. 1 still recording. I threw on my boots and stepped onto the porch. Cool lake air carried the smell of wet grass and fresh asphalt. Beyond the shoreline, rotating amber construction lights flickered through the darkness like slow-moving fireflies. They weren't waiting for the 4th of July ceremony anymore. They were making their move now. Daniel answered on the second ring. They're at the entrance. I know. Don't confront them alone. Sheriff's deputies are already on standby. Keep recording. I grabbed my body camera, clipped it beneath my jacket, and started walking instead of driving. Gravel crunched beneath my boots while frogs fell silent one by one as I approached the road. The closer I got, the louder the sounds became. A generator hummed. Steel clanged against concrete. Someone shouted measurements. When I reached the white oak, I stopped behind the trunk. Floodlights illuminated the entrance. Maggie stood beside the new gate giving orders while 3 contractors worked around the old survey marker. One man held a portable cutoff saw. Its screaming blade showered orange sparks across the pavement. Another swung a sledgehammer into the weathered stone monument. Chunks of granite scattered across the road. The monument that had stood there for decades. The one tied to every original survey. I pressed record on my phone. Maggie. She turned slowly. I thought you'd finally learned when to stay away. I walked into the light, keeping both hands visible. You are destroying county boundary monuments. She laughed. Those old rocks are landscaping. No. I answered clearly, making sure both my camera and the emergency dispatcher heard every word. Those are registered survey controls protecting an active property boundary. I'm requesting immediate law enforcement response for evidence destruction and criminal trespass." Her smile disappeared. One contractor hesitated. Another lowered the saw. Then a pickup door slammed. A man I'd never seen before stepped out carrying a bolt-action rifle over one shoulder. "Not aimed. Not yet. Private construction site," he barked. "Leave." I stopped 20 feet away. "I am standing on my own property. Your presence is being recorded." The body camera's red indicator blinked steadily beneath my jacket. Behind me, I heard another sound. Crunching gravel. Frank Delaney. Daniel. Two neighboring property owners. They didn't approach. They simply watched. Witnesses. Exactly as planned. Maggie pointed toward the steel gate. "Finish installing the lock." The contractor lifted heavy bolt cutters. One snap. The temporary county inspection lock fell into the dirt. Another camera caught the entire sequence from a pine tree overlooking the entrance. The contractor kicked the broken lock aside. A brass tag spun across the pavement before stopping beside the old white oak. The same engraved number from Harold's key ring flashed beneath the floodlights. Then everything changed. Blue lights washed across the trees. Sirens. Not fast. Controlled. 3 sheriff's cruisers rolled quietly onto the shoulder, while 2 county investigators stepped out behind them. No one had called them in panic. They had been waiting. Deputy Collins raised one hand. "Everyone stop where you are." The cutoff saw died. Silence rushed over the road. One investigator photographed the shattered monument. Another picked up the broken inspection lock using an evidence bag. Deputy Collins turned toward Maggie. "Did you authorize removal of these survey controls?" "They're HOA property. I'll need documentation." She opened her folder immediately. The same ownership packet. The same papers. The same lie. The investigator glanced at the parcel number and exchanged a look with his partner. Neither argued. Neither arrested her. Instead, they collected every document she voluntarily handed over. Every signature. Every written claim. Every statement. When the deputies finally left, Maggie looked relieved. "They can't stop tomorrow," she told her board members. "The grand reopening goes on exactly as planned." I watched workers replace the ribbon across the entrance while the shattered stone marker remained sealed inside an evidence box. Daniel walked up beside me without taking his eyes off the gate. "They've committed everything now," he said quietly. I nodded. "Good. Tomorrow the whole neighborhood would be watching." By 10 o'clock, Pine Ridge Shores looked less like a neighborhood and more like a luxury resort opening. A jazz quartet played beneath a white canopy while champagne glasses clinked in the summer heat. Fresh mulch, cut grass, and expensive perfume drifted through the entrance plaza. Television cameras pointed toward the enormous ribbon stretched across the brand-new gate. Maggie stood at the center wearing a cream-colored suit instead of her usual polo, smiling beside county officials she expected to impress. Behind her, the polished wooden sign gleamed in the sunlight. "Welcome to Pine Ridge Shores. Grand reopening." She lifted the microphone. "Today we celebrate years of investment, responsible stewardship, and community ownership." Her speech stopped halfway through the sentence. A white county SUV rolled quietly onto the shoulder. Then another. Then 2 sheriff's vehicles. No sirens. No drama. Just quiet authority. The music faded as County Administrator Reeves stepped forward, holding a sealed envelope. "Mrs. Holloway." She forced another smile. "Wonderful. You're just in time." "I am." He handed her the document. "Administrative stop order. Effective immediately." Her smile finally cracked. "This has to be a mistake." "No." He looked toward the contractors. "All work on this entrance is suspended pending investigation." Workers slowly lowered their tools. The ribbon remained hanging across the gate. Maggie recovered quickly. "This is only temporary. We have complete ownership documentation." Daniel walked forward carrying a survey tube. "So let's discuss documentation." He unrolled the original engineering plat across a folding table while 2 county surveyors secured the corners against the breeze. The paper smelled faintly of old ink and dust. One surveyor pointed with a brass scale. "Original county infrastructure plat." Another traced the faded notation. "Private service access. Subject to cabin parcel 18. Never dedicated to public ownership." Silence spread through the crowd. Maggie laughed too loudly. "That map is obsolete." "It isn't," the surveyor replied. "It has never been vacated." Daniel produced the maintenance ledgers from the forgotten control building. Then the inspection notebooks Frank had preserved. Then the original engineering approval tied to Harold's brass key tag. Every document matched. Every boundary marker aligned. Every forgotten plant from the past suddenly became impossible to ignore. The county administrator nodded toward me. I opened the weathered metal document box from Harold's cedar chest. Inside rested the original recorded ownership file, the county seal, the signatures, the recorded easement language. The access road legally belonged to the cabin parcel. Mine. Maggie's voice sharpened. He's manipulating old paperwork. Before anyone answered, 2 investigators stepped beside the podium. We also received copies of correspondence sent by Pine Ridge Shores HOA. One investigator displayed enlarged copies of Maggie's letters. To the bank, to my insurance company, to the planning office, to the fire marshal. Each one falsely declaring HOA ownership of the access road. These statements are materially inconsistent with county records. Maggie pointed directly at me. He's trying to steal our community. No, another voice answered. Frank Delaney walked through the crowd carrying his worn maintenance notebook. I maintained that road for 19 years. He laid the notebook beside the engineering logs. They ordered us never to mention the original control building. Then Daniel connected an offline laptop to a portable display. The HOA emails appeared one after another. Maggie's own instructions filled the screen. Do not circulate the original county plat. Parcel 18 raises unnecessary questions. No one spoke. The only sound was the clicking of television cameras. Deputy Collins stepped forward. Margaret Holloway. She took one slow step backward. You are being detained pending investigation into evidence tampering, false filings, and destruction of protected survey monuments. Another deputy collected her HOA credentials while board members quietly moved away from her. The county inspectors supervised contractors as power to the electronic gate was disconnected. The motor hummed once. Stopped. The barrier remained open. Safe. Accessible. Exactly as required. No homes lost access. No emergency routes were blocked. The county posted temporary traffic control while engineers assumed supervision. Administrator Reeves handed me one final document. Mr. Walker, as the recorded owner, control of this access corridor remains with your parcel unless and until a lawful easement agreement is executed. I looked past the silent crowd toward the road stretching through the neighborhood. Every mansion, every clubhouse, every celebration they had planned, every dollar of property value they believed they owned. It had depended, from the very beginning, on a strip of ground they never possessed. 3 months later, the first thing I noticed every morning wasn't paperwork or arguments. It was the sound of tires rolling peacefully over gravel. No chains, no shouting, no generators. Just the quiet rhythm of neighbors driving to work while the smell of lake water and sun-warmed cedar drifted across my porch exactly the way it had the day I first fell in love with this cabin. The county eventually approved a permanent access easement. Not because the HOA demanded it, because I offered it. Every homeowner kept legal access to their homes under one condition. The road would remain exactly what it had always been on the original engineering plat. A privately owned access corridor protected by a recorded easement, maintained through a transparent agreement supervised by the county instead of HOA politics. Nobody lost their house. Nobody was trapped behind a gate. Emergency vehicles received unrestricted access 24 hours a day. The road finally belonged to the truth instead of the loudest voice. Pine Ridge Shores looked different after the audit. The old board resigned one by one. Residents elected new directors who opened every financial record for independent review. Years of questionable assessments were refunded where possible, and maintenance contracts were rewritten through public meetings instead of closed-door conversations. People who had barely spoken to each other during the investigation now volunteered together to repair walking trails, repaint the marina dock, and restore the entrance landscaping without pretending it belonged to someone else. Maggie faced exactly what the evidence supported. The false filings, destroyed survey monuments, and fraudulent ownership representations became part of a criminal investigation. Several civil judgments followed, and she permanently lost her position within the association. The contractor who cut the inspection lock accepted responsibility after investigators recovered the body camera footage and matching tool marks. The former property manager who had warned about Parcel 18 cooperated with authorities and helped explain how the records had been hidden for years. One quiet afternoon, Frank and I walked back to the old white oak. Fresh grass had already begun growing where they had dug that desperate hole. County surveyors had installed a new bronze boundary monument exactly where the shattered stone once stood. The weathered wooden stake remained beside it. So did the rusted strands of barbed wire wrapped around the old tree. Some things deserve to stay. I unlocked the forgotten concrete control building one last time with Harold's brass key. Inside, the air still carried the smell of machine oil, dust, and aging paper. The leather-bound maintenance ledgers now rested inside climate-controlled county archives, but one item remained on the shelf. The faded black-and-white aerial photograph. I unfolded it completely. For the first time, I saw the entire road exactly as Harold had known it decades earlier. Nothing had changed except the people claiming to own it. I smiled, turned off the lights, and locked the steel door behind me. The brass key felt heavier than it ever had before. Not because it opened a building, because it unlocked the truth. The lake was quiet. The road was open. The ground never lied. Justice isn't loud. It's smart, patient, and inevitable.